Welcome into Around the Felt. I'm your host, Reagan Loescher, here with my co-host, Colin Tong. We're going to be breaking down the Cleveland Browns tonight, talking about, where we graded their 2024 season. And then we're going to get into some draft stuff, where we kind of want them to go with the number 2 overall pick, as well as, what they can do in free agency to improve this team going into 2025. But Colin, how are we doing tonight, dude?
I'm doing well, man. The Browns. I'm sorry, Browns fans. This is not going to be a fun episode for you because let's be honest, it was about as bad of a season as it could have went. Off a playoff berth the year prior to go 3-14. The quarterback situation. Now your boy Myles Garrett's like, I am not signing an extension. I will not play for the Browns. That's how bad your season was. So, I'm doing great, but this is going to be a tough conversation about the Cleveland Browns, Reagan.
Yeah, but there are some ways they can improve, and it's not going to be right away. But, I think their focus ultimately is, getting some of those bad contracts like Deshaun Watson off the books. And, it'll be a couple bad years, but it's nothing Browns fans aren't used to. So, familiar territory. And I'm a Jet fan. So, I understand the pain completely, actually, maybe a little bit more, but still, it's just getting rid of Watson and trying to get some young pieces around them. And I know, I do think Myles Garrett, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but I wouldn't be mad with them moving on from him and getting as much capital as they can.
Ooh, okay.
And I don't think that's crazy at all. But for the Browns, I gave them an F. I don't know if, and I'm sure you gave them an F too. I mean, there's not a whole lot.
Yeah, I gave him an F. I gave him an F. There's no suspensions needed here. It's a fucking F.
They took a major step back, and it was honestly, it's interesting because Watson looked so bad. DTR was worse than Watson. I don't even know why they kept giving him chances. At least Jameis
was
fun, moved the ball downfield, kept him in some games.
And Tillman were great with Jameis Winston.
Yeah. No, Judy's sick. Judy is definitely sick. I mean, what was I going to say? Tillman was sick. So at least those two, are definitely some bright spots. I would be curious. And honestly, assuming they do go quarterback there, at least you're setting up whoever you end up, Ward, Sanders, or maybe they don't take one at 2 and they wait for the second, third round to take someone on day 2. But they're setting them up in a good position at the very least. I mean, Nick Chubb, it was good to see him come back, but at this point, I think he doesn't have a lot left in the tank. And on the defensive side of the ball, you got some guys. I still thought the defense was decent last year, but I don't know. It's just it's just a lost season. I mean, Stefanski's still a great coach. So I think, he will have the ability to turn it around. I mean, we saw what he was able to do last year with Joe Flacco. So that's the nice bright spot for you, Browns fans. You know what Kevin Stefanski can do, and I ultimately think them getting Deshaun Watson was never what he wanted. I think him having to play Deshaun Watson is never what he wanted. But when you give up that much capital and pay that guy that much money, you have to give him as many opportunities as possible to try to figure it out. And I think ownership really was the big proponent behind getting him and then playing him as long as they did. So I think finally they're going to be like, look, the Watson experience is over. And I know actually he's out for the year anyway. I mean, I know I believe he's already out for the year anyway. So blessing in disguise. One of the rare people that you probably don't feel bad about getting injured and missing time.
We don't root for injuries, but in this case, we'll let it slide.
Yeah. So, that's a blessing in disguise for Browns fans. So, I would either say, if you opt to not draft a quarterback, I would like to see them, go out and sign one of those guys like Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, one of those younger quarterbacks that, you don't have to pay a lot, maybe even a Justin Fields, if they ultimately are like, you know what? Let's not draft a quarterback because we're not putting them in a great situation right now. Let's just clean house, work on, bringing in some young guys and, stacking up as much capital as possible. But Colin, why did you give them an F before we get too much into what they can do?
I mean, you went to the playoffs in the 2023 season, and that was with very questionable quarterback play. I mean, Joe Flacco was great down the stretch, though, and that just shows how good of a coach Stefanski is, right? And you see a 3-14 record, and you'd think a coach would be on the hot seat. In this case, I think it'd be a massive mistake to move on from Stefanski. I think he's a great offensive mind. Then you go from the playoffs to winning 3 games. Watson was garbage. 5 touchdowns, 3 picks in 7 games. He threw for 1150 yards. I mean, garbage. Your offense was 28th total, 32nd in scoring. You had the worst offense in football, right? Your defense took a big step back. You're the 27th scoring defense. Now, a factor that might be just how bad the offense was, putting him in some tough situations. But let's be honest, that 2023 Cleveland Browns defense was very good at home, sometimes questionable on the road, but still a very good defense. Deshaun Watson then tears his Achilles, and then rehabbing 3 months later, re-tears the same Achilles. And you already pushed money back on his contract to create cap space, so now you're buried in 26 and 27. Like, you can't get out until after 27. Like, you can, but you're going to have a miraculous season like the Broncos did with all that dead cap on your books, right? We mentioned the positives. Jerry Jeudy. I mean, that looked like a great trade for him. I'm sure Denver wishes they had Jerry Jeudy still after what he did with Jameis Winston. Cedric Tillman, a guy that, didn't get drafted very high. Didn't necessarily live up to who he's supposed to be at Tennessee, but he had some really big games to the point where I snatched him up in a lot of dynasty leagues, and I'm holding on to him because he showed his potential. And with his frame, it's like a type of receiver you can't find very often. So that's a positive. You mentioned Nick Chubb. I mean, it was positive that he at least got back on the field. Like, you're really happy for him in that regard. But clearly, Nick Chubb's not going to be a top back in this league anymore. And it seems like they're going to move on at the position. Deontay Foreman's also a free agent, right? So it's like, they got a lot of work to do in this offense. But ultimately, winning 3 games after making the playoffs and your quarterback somehow, who was already garbage, got worse and then gets hurt. And then gets hurt again after you push back money, and now you're buried paying this guy. He's not going to play for you till 2026. It's just really, really ugly in Cleveland right now. And the cherry on top, I know it wasn't necessarily in the season, but it was Myles Garrett, the star of your team, your best player, perennial DPOY candidate, requesting a trade and saying, it's so bad here that I will not even consider an extension, even to give me 40-50 million a year.
Yeah, that's, that really tells you, how sour it can get real quick, especially Garrett's a guy that's already made his money. I think he's just tired of the losing culture, unfortunately. And honestly, for Browns fans, I would trade him because, even if you do pay him, you do keep him. By the time you actually get this team back in a spot with how bad that Watson contract is for you, he's not going to be at the level he is now to fit your Super Bowl window. So you might as well trade him away and get a haul, because that's the type of player that will fetch you 2 first rounders, multiple day 2 picks. So why keep him, honestly? I mean, you saw what does keeping him next year? Like, what is your ceiling? 5-6 wins? I mean, maybe at best, if everything goes right, you somehow squeak into the playoffs. But let's be honest, you're not going to be a Super Bowl team. So why not get as much capital as possible?
Who the fuck's the quarterback going to be, right? It's like,
yeah,
who out there is an option that could lead this team to the playoffs next year after what we just saw? You know what I mean?
And the only reason I'm giving them saying like playoffs is their ceiling is like, and I know the Washington's a different situation, but I mean, they went from, the second worst team to a playoff team in 1 year. So I'm not going to rule it out. I mean, I'd say the situations are very...
Shedeur Sanders, the next Jaden Daniels, because that's what you're asking for.
I don't know. I mean, the past 2 years, CJ Stroud brought the Texans to the playoffs in year 1. Jaden Daniels brought the Washington Commanders in year 1. So I don't know. I mean, unlikely, but hey, I'm not going to rule it out. If the Browns go quarterback at 2, second quarterback off the board, I don't know. If history repeats itself, you guys will be in the playoffs. Well, and at least guaranteed 1 playoff win. Actually, you're in the Super Bowl. I think you might be in the Super Bowl because, Stroud won 1 game, then Daniels won 2 games. So that means the Browns will be in the Super Bowl next year with Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. Heard it here first.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how Browns fans wishes it would go. This doesn't seem very likely.
We're just following the breadcrumbs here.
Yeah, and also a big thing with this Browns team that might be different from those other teams is the Browns are currently $22 million over the cap, right? So they need to clear some space. No, significant free agents. Chubb, Deontay Foreman. Elijah Moore, he's probably gone. Jedrick
I think so.
Wills, the tackle you took out of Alabama a couple years back, has struggled to stay healthy the past 2 years, which is not good. I could see them bringing him back because the offensive line, which used to be the best part of your team, has certainly taken steps back. So maybe you get Wills back at a cheap deal because he's been hurt the past 2 years. And then Jameis Winston, right? Which I don't know if Jameis is going to be back, but they need to figure out something at quarterback. Someone's got to start for him next year. They don't really have the money to go get a Darnold. You know, Rodgers is not going to go there. Russell Wilson's not going to go there. So I think it's going to have to be a flyer on a young guy, as you were saying, Reagan. And, you know, maybe Gardner Minshew or something like that, you know, like a total bridge, just stopgap for the year because you know you're going to suck. Or you take one at 2. And I'm also seeing from some Giants reporters that are like coming out of the combine from what they've heard, they're like, if the Giants want a quarterback, they got to move to 1 because Cleveland is taking a quarterback at 2, right? So I think Cam Ward's going 1 no matter what. I think if it's not Tennessee making the pick, I think Cleveland moves up to 1 and makes the pick, or the Giants move up to 1 and makes the pick and take Cam Ward. The question is at number 2, do you take Abdul Carter? Or do you take QB2?
I would like them to go with Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Then you either on day 2 go draft a quarterback. And if you opt not to, that's fine. Then go out with one in free agency. You sign Zach Wilson or Trey Lance or a quarterback like that, Mac Jones, one of those 3 for cheap. Then go get maybe Daniel Jones for cheap as well. So you have 2 different quarterbacks competing.
Some DJ talk.
Yes.
I'm seeing the Colts are interested in Daniel Jones. There might be some competition there.
So I would bring in like 2 different, a younger guy and then a guy that we've seen have some success in this league. And then with that roster, and it's like, all right, we're not in love with anyone this year. We bring in a couple different lottery type ticket quarterbacks next year. Worst case, none of them pan out. Then we're in a spot to draft a quarterback again in the top 5. It's just next year's draft class for quarterbacks just seems to be better. And also it's like, you're really not set, like the way this team is constructed right now. It's probably it's just not setting up for a quarterback for success. So, and honestly, like, and this is coming from a Jet fan, like just the track record of your team in drafting quarterbacks has just not been good.
It's terrible, dude.
And a lot of times they're not in good situations. So you just ruin them. So it's like, maybe it's like, just wait a little bit and just take a couple years, wait to get Watson off the books, try to stack up as much capital as possible, and honestly clean house. I'm surprised more teams don't try it, where it's like, let's just trade away all the good players. And I guess ultimately it's like the owners are rich. They care about money more so than anything else. And, if you trade away all your good players, then fans are going to stop coming to games, and, then that hurts their pockets. So that's why you don't see teams cleaning house more often and just doing a fresh restart.
That's a good point, because I think what we saw last year at the Hard Knocks of Giants owner John Mara saying Saquon is by far our most popular player. The word he used was popular from an owner's standpoint who cares about the money. There is no doubt Myles Garrett is the most popular player on that team. He's their best player. And it's like, the front office could say all they want. We're not in the business of trading away great players. But, you look at this roster and it's like, you know what? You're fucked for the next 2 years. Like, let's be honest. You are, unless you hit on a quarterback. They're going to be terrible next year. What I would do is, if Myles Garrett is that steadfast, I am not signing extension. I will not re-sign. What option do you have, right? You're not going to just let him walk for nothing in free agency when you're this bad of a team. It sounds so crazy to like say trade Myles Garrett, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's
I don't think it's that crazy.
And they net a first-round pick this year and a first-round pick next year. You take Abdul Carter at 2.
Well, actually, I don't even know if they have to take Abdul Carter at 2. I mean, they could honestly trade back too. Like, I'm okay with them.
I mean,
passing on Carter, passing on Hunter, passing on the quarterbacks, and just trading back and then just stacking up more draft capital. I mean, the only way this team is going to have a chance to complete for the playoffs with how strapped they are by that Watson contract is by hitting on a lot of these draft picks. So if they trade Garrett and they trade back, that's a lot of capital that's going to be coming in. That gives them a lot of holes to fill when they don't have the cap space to do it. So I don't hate that idea either. because there's a lot of teams that would trade up to 2 to go get Shador
I don't think there's a lot of teams. I think it's the
There's
Raiders
enough,
at 6. There's Raiders at 6, or Jets at 7. Which,
That's
if you move back to 6 or 7, that's still striking distance to get a really damn good player. You're just not getting one of the considered elite prospects.
which is fine, because I'd be more than okay with moving back to 6 or 7 and then having 2 first-rounders next year, probably 3, because you're getting another one with Myles Garrett. So you're looking at 3 first-rounders next year plus 2 first-rounders this year, because you would imagine Myles Garrett gets you a first-rounder this year, first-rounder next year. So you're looking at 2 first-rounders this year, 3 first-rounders next year, plus multiple day 2 picks between this year and next year. So
or
that doesn't sound terrible.
Or, if you don't get a first next year, you get the Jets or Raiders second-round pick this year. Now you got two picks on the top of this. I believe they have their second-round pick, right?
After
the Watson trade.
But you really think that a team could trade up from 6 or 7 to 2 and still, not have to give up a future first?
Well, it could be pick 6, second this year, second next year, and
I guess, that's true.
That's a range
Move
that I
back
think
4
can make
spots.
sense. Yeah,
but
especially if the first quarterback's off the board. But then Cleveland's going to call the Giants and be like, "Hey, we're getting calls for pick number 2 right now to take a quarterback. They're trying to jump you." And there's a world where Cleveland moves back 1 spot, nets like a 3rd-round pick from the Giants, and they still get one of those elite prospects though, and you get another pick.
Yeah. I mean, hey, even if you turn that into the 34th pick, just moving back 1 spot, I mean, you probably have to give up some stuff with it. Like, you may have to give up your 4th or 5th rounder to go back to the Giants. But if you're able to move back 1 spot and maybe get that 34th pick from the Giants on top of it, it's not a bad spot. So I'd rather see them, move back, trade Garrett, and just acquire as many picks as possible. It might not be the popular answer. I am curious, what Browns fans think. So I hope a bunch of them do comment, because I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions. There usually are when you're a bad team right now in a bad spot. Everyone's got a different idea of, the best plan to go forward. But hey, that's the fun of being fans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think if you're going to stick and pick it too, I think Cam Ward's my number 1 guy. If Tennessee does go like Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter 1, I think you go Cam Ward if he's there. If he's not, whoever's higher on your board, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, stick and pick. Worry about quarterback next year. Find a stopgap option, because let's be honest, you're going to be a bad team again next year, given how strapped you are against the cap.
Right. You're right. But let's get Drock in here.
Yeah, Drock.
Drock is here. Drock is
Impeccable
here.
timing.
All right. First question from Lino, an open-ended question. Myles G to the blank.
He wants me to say
Cowboys.
The Cowboys, yeah, because we talked about this on the Cowboys pod. He really wants it. I'm like, I know your boy Dak and CD just cleared some cap space, but I don't know if they got enough room for Myles G.
I'd like that a lot. I think that'd be cool. Yeah, I know people are saying Philly, but I don't see that happening. There's just no way
I keep seeing that. I'm like, dude, that would be the ultimate Death Star move, is they added Myles Garrett to that team, dude.
I don't know. I almost feel like the Browns are in a spot where it's like, you're not going to trade them in division, but there's no issue. There's no reason you can't trade them in the AFC. Buffalo makes a lot of sense to me, just because, what better way to finally try to get past Patrick Mahomes, but getting debatably the best player in football, on the defensive side of the ball. So Buffalo makes a lot of sense. Washington could too.
Washington makes a lot of sense. They're going to be lurking for sure.
Green Bay, even, I wouldn't hate either.
Detroit, I would not hate at all.
Make the money work?
Yeah, Detroit's got some room, man.
Yeah, all right. Green Bay, I'd like to. There's a lot of contenders I could see.
Chicago, I would like Chicago too, but they just keep giving out draft picks to build up that O-line right now. But they're later picks. So they still got those early ones.
All right, last question for you guys, Drock's question of the night. Has the rivalry with the Steelers lost its intensity, or is it still one of the best in the NFL?
I would say Pittsburgh and Baltimore are bigger rivals now. I mean, the Browns have just been the doormat of this division for what feels like 25 years, they just they haven't been competitive enough. I think, obviously there's still some juice there. Not nearly enough for me, though. I think
I mean,
this
the
is more
Browns
of
handle the Steelers in recent memory. They've been able to take care of the Steelers every time they run into them. I mean, they went into Pittsburgh, in one of Big Ben's last years and just whomped them in Pittsburgh. Even this past year, I mean, they beat them in a snow game and we're talking about a 3-win team where we just gave them an F, but
Oh,
they
the
still beat
Jameis little fucking helicopter in
still,
the end zone. That was
bro,
sick.
still.
That was
So
sick. That was the highlight of the season.
I would say the rivalry is still definitely there, and the Browns definitely hold their own in this rivalry. I mean, the team plays up. I mean, it's a 3-win team, and one of those wins was against a playoff team in Pittsburgh down the stretch towards the end of the season when everyone's like, Pittsburgh's losing to everybody. They're playing all these good teams. And guess what? They just lost to the 2 wins Browns to give them their 3rd win of the season when it's like, they can't beat anybody. So the rivalry is definitely very much there. It might not seem it over the next couple of years, but no matter what, I mean, anytime it's an AFC North game, I don't care what 2 teams match up, it's going to be a 1-score game that's going to come down to the wire.
Just screams like 17-14.
It's probably the most competitive division in the sense where, you match up any 2 teams, they're going to compete. I don't know if you see that in any other division in the league where it's that competitive no matter who's playing.
No, they do have a reputation for that, where it's like AFC North teams going at it. It's going to be a war, like some smash mouth football.
Records go out the door. And let's not forget, like they beat the Ravens too early in the year too. So it's like,
they win division games. They just don't beat anyone else.
So, and did they beat the Bengals or no? That'd be funny if they're only
3 win division wins.
I'm going to check that quick, but that just tells you though, like, no matter how bad any of these teams are, like they're going to compete. You got to throw the records out the window. Let's see. They beat the Steelers. They beat, no, they beat the Jaguars early on. They did not beat the Bengals.
Okay.
But they played them tight. Both games were actually only one of them. Actually, they lost 24-6. So one of them. So sorry. I guess it's not always that, but it does feel that way.
Yeah. All right. That wraps it up here, huh, Reagan?
That does.
We're done shitting on the Brownies. But hey, hit our comments. What do you want to do with pick number 2? Is it quarterback or bust, or do you want to just punt the position this year and let's go get an Abdul Carter, a Travis Hunter? What are your thoughts on Myles Garrett? Are you guys upset you're gonna have to get new jerseys? Because that happens to me a lot as a Giants fan. So, you might have to get a new jersey. Myles Garrett might be out the door, but let us know your thoughts in the comments. Reagan, any last words?
I would just say, I mean, I feel like, even if they trade Myles Garrett, he's still one of their better players in recent memory. I feel like you can't really be mad at him for wanting out. And I think, like I said earlier, it's just mutual beneficial for both parties. So let's get some picks, Brownies.